Good day. We've got VP of Strategy and Investor Relations, Ian Grant of Progressive Planet, joining us. The company just reported its year-end April 2023 financial results, showing revenue growth of over 400% to $19.5 million. Ian is here to review the foundational year and discuss the milestones and outlook for the coming year. Progressive Planet develops and manufactures key products and ingredients for more sustainable solutions in the cement, waste management, agriculture, and animal care markets. It is Wednesday, September the 6th, and I'm Martin Gago with Market Radius Research. Please remember, this is neither recommendation nor investment advice. We are here to learn about the company. Ian, thank you very much for joining us. And while we're going to focus on the company's financial results and outlook, can we first give investors a brief overview of Progressive Planet and its intellectual property and how 2022 and 2023 have been so transformative and foundational for the company's growth plans? Please walk us through the news.
It's hard to go a week or even a day without reading something about climate change or food insecurity, with cement and agriculture industries being front and center of a lot of that news as heavy emitters and unsecure industries that need solutions. At Progressive Planet, we're a manufacturing company with proven product lines, but at our core, we're an innovation company developing critical low carbon and carbon sequestering solutions for the cement and agriculture industries. But of course, innovations only add value if they can be scaled. And a lot of companies have ideas and innovations, but fail in execution. So we've built a platform for execution where vertically integrated base business, where our innovations are ready, we can bring them in and scale them. So you can start to see how our company naturally falls into three pillars that all work together for our common goal of developing and commercializing those critical low carbon and carbon sequestering solutions. The cement pillar, it's about reducing the $363 billion global cement industry's massive carbon footprint with products that address growing shortages. One of the key solutions that we've developed is our proprietary technology called Pause Glass. It captures and stores CO2 from cement stack emissions and can replace up to 50% of the cement in concrete. Pause Glass was strategically designed as a bolt-on to existing cement plants, which is why the Canadian arm of the world's largest cement company, LafargeHolcim, has partnered with us on our pilot plant that we're breaking ground on this year, which we hope to license for global expansion as early as 2024 once the pilot plant is operational. The fertilizer pillar it's about reducing the carbon footprint of the $60 billion agrochemicals industry in North America and building our soils so they're better able to store carbon and grow food for our growing population. With proprietary products like Carbon PK, which we announced in June, we're reducing fertilizer application by 50% per acre with natural ingredients that rebuild soils. In the past year, we developed partnerships with major agricultural players in southern Alberta who are trusting 617 acres to our innovative fertilizer Carbon PK this growing season, with the potential for expansion once those results are proven out this fall. The manufacturing pillar, as mentioned, is a critical piece to our growth strategy. It was added through strategic acquisition this last year to provide a base to launch our innovations from, and a base that accelerates our innovations to market faster with higher margins. And when we talk about the financials in the next slide, this is where it's coming from today. And I'll show you later in the presentation that this base actually accelerates the commercialization of our low carbon and carbon sequestering innovations. These operations supply everyday products to more than 10,000 retail operations across North America, with 50% of the revenue generated in Canada and 50% in the US. I use the term foundational when I talk about this past year because it really was that. We integrated this base business into our growth strategy and the 50 people that came along with it as well, and they're going to be integral in us reaching our growth potential. So here's a summary of year one of those growth pillars that we just went through. We generated revenues of $19.54 million in fiscal 2023, which was an increase of 410% from $3.83 million in fiscal 2022. Most of that's attributed to the acquisition, as well as implementing price increases that we rolled out during the year, and the start of a large new account, which we would have saw a press release on, which was near the end of fiscal 2023. The goal for this is to continue to grow revenues throughout 2024 and beyond. And of course, we believe that we can achieve that. The operating cash flow increased by 3.8 million from 2.19 million used in fiscal 2022 to 1.61 million generated from operations in fiscal 2023. So this shows that our base business is really starting to kick out cash, which was a key part of our growth strategy. It allows us to accelerate the commercialization of our innovations, as mentioned, with less dilution over time to our shareholders, which again was a key part of our growth strategy and why we made the acquisition. This is what we did in year one, and we see this number also continuing to grow as we grow our revenues, and it's going to allow us to fund more growth over time. Gross margins, we increased those from 12.6 million in fiscal 2022 to 26.2 in fiscal 2023. This is a result of operational improvements that we implemented in the last year, negotiating those price increases where we could, and making hard decisions to cut ultra low margin business where we were unable to implement price increases. So the growth in revenue doesn't necessarily even tell the whole story, because we had to replace all the business that we cut that was ultra low with higher margin business. So we see it as a huge success for us to generate the revenues that we generated, generate the cash flows that we generated, and improve our gross margins by up to 26.2%.
Ian, can you give any sense of how much business you cut that you kind of had to replace, just sort of to give an idea of sort of the new sales you've generated?
Yeah, so the short answer is that understanding what our fiscal 2022 revenues would have been with all the audited adjustments is weeks-long exercise. That's not a great use of our time. But we believe that we grew revenues by as much as $1 million. And, you know, some of that is replacing those low margin business as well. And so it's really hard for me to go into that without going through the exercise of actually making all the adjustments on what our fiscal 2022 would have been had we had that business in our operations this entire time.
Understand. Okay.
But our target on the gross margin side is to get to around 30%. So we made excellent progress in year one towards that target. And as we add higher margin fertilizers to our business over the course of the coming years, we see this number being very achievable. The net loss of 1.16 million in fiscal 2023 is really more like 290,000 when we take out 870,000 in R&D investments that we made. And it's our goal to grow the revenues and the cash flow and work towards break even or a small profit from the base operations, but not at the expense of limiting our growth. So really, you know, what we're doing here that's going to deliver the most shareholder value for our most value for our shareholders is in being able to grow and commercialize our innovations. And that has a cost to it. And so it's not necessarily in our best interest to be very profitable with this base business right now. The goal is to limit the dilution and have those cash flows allowing us to fund as much of the growth as we can from this base business.
Well, looking at your financials, I noticed your cash flows into investing activities almost matched your operating cash flows. So really, and you paid off some debt in that as well. So really, you're at a self-sustaining basis where you're not dependent upon the capital markets, which a lot of companies wish they could be in that situation.
Yeah, in this market, it's a great place to be in. Obviously, our preference is that our next raise is at a much higher level, and we have a level of confidence that we won't need to go to the market right now, and we can focus on growing our business and allowing the cash flows to fund that growth during this time, which is a huge win for us right now.
Yeah.
So the other side that we show in our financials is that we were able to repay in full our line of credit balance of 1.48 million in fiscal 2023. And we also repaid in full 2 variable interest rate bank loans in fiscal 2023 related to the acquisition of 0.97 million and 0.71 million respectively. So not only does this clean up all these loans and line of credits, free up about 400K in principal repayments per year that was eating at our cash, it also gives us a good credit rating as we look to finance our growth with non-dilutive capital going forward. One of the biggest questions that we get is how we're going to fund PosGlass. And it's our preference to fund PosGlass with non-dilutive funding. There's a lot of non-dilutive funding out there by way of government grants and low interest rate and favorable term debt for projects like PosGlass that have a massive economic and environmental benefit potential attached to them, both in Canada and on a global scale. So we believe the potential is there to fund PosGlass, the project, fully with non-dilutive funding. And a huge part of my job over the spring and summer has been working towards this objective. So the last piece, or second last piece here, is cash on hand of 700K in April 30th, 2023. So as it stands right now, as mentioned, with the removal of the debt principal repayments, we don't have a need to go to the market to do a financing, and our preference would be to do our next financing at a higher level sometime in the future. So I'd like to tell people, if you are interested in our company, get it at this level on the open market, because the next time that we are doing a financing, is our preference to do that at a much higher level. And then just bringing things back into context, we're an innovation company. In fiscal 2023, we invested $870,000 in research and development and $1.31 million in property, plant, and equipment. And both of those were related to the development of industry disrupting low carbon and carbon sequestering cement and agricultural products that are expected to position us for long-term revenue growth and profitability. So now I want to take a few minutes and just talk about why this base business that's performing the way that it is so foundational to our growth strategy. So our base business ships more than 2 million packaged products annually to retail stores across North America. It's important because as we move towards commercialization, we will move to making those innovations and getting them out the door, which is what our experienced team does every single day. We also do this from established operations where we can easily scale to double output without investment and up to 8 times our annual output with investment, which means that we can grow to begin meeting the huge demand of the cement and agricultural industries as we commercialize those innovations into the ready market access that's created by these everyday products that we sell every day. So as an example, our base business is broken up roughly a third into each of the categories of packages you see here, which is industrial absorbents, animal, and agricultural product categories. And as part of our animal line of products, for example, we're in the cat litter business. And while the cat litter business is $1 billion business in Canada alone, it's not sexy. But it gets us into Loblaws, it gets us into Co-op and into some of the world's largest retail chains that I can't name by name. And then when we make industrial absorbents, like the package you see on the left there, that gets us into many of the biggest hardware, automotive retail chains in Canada. Again, many I can't name by name, but we make agricultural products as well, and we get into 2,300 Tractor Supply stores in the US and growing. And all of these stores that I mentioned sell fertilizers, and many sell cement products. So you start to see kind of a massive catalytic effect where the value of our company, as we commercialize these innovations, you can kind of start to see the revenue potential before it's even there. So we know that, adding SKUs into some of these huge stores could generate millions of dollars revenue, just, 1 or 2 SKUs. So you can really start to kind of calculate net present value of our technologies before those revenues are there, and really kind of tie back in why it was so important for us to clean up this base business and get it kicking out cash the way that it is for our growth strategy going forward.
And just, Ian, for clarification, industrial absorbents are, I spill some motor oil in my car repair shop and you sprinkle it on there and it absorbs up the oil and its way of, or other sort of chemicals and that sort of a thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That, or, at the gas station, you see that bin that says for a spill, sprinkle this. We sell the Otter Co-op gas station, stuff like that. We sell, painting is another use for it. So anywhere where there's a spill, basically, that you want to clean up with something that's going to absorb it and trap it, that's where those products come in.
And I just want to highlight, you got the logo there of Tractor Supply Co. I do not believe they operate in Canada, but it's kind of a pretty remarkable U.S. story. Can you maybe get like I think they've got like a $20 billion market cap, and they've got what
Yeah.
2,000 stores. Can you maybe just give a very high overview on who they are, and I presume that fits in well with your fertilizers, and a lot of products could go through that distribution.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tractor Supply is a massive account for us out of the US. They have 2,300 stores today, and they're looking to produce somewhere between 70 and 90 more stores every year until they reach 3,000 stores. So for us, we see that as huge growth potential, even just in the products that we're selling today. But as you mentioned, they sell fertilizers, they sell cementous products. So we see the potential to keep adding SKUs into that retail chain as they become available to us, and being able to get our products into every state in the U.S. because Tractor Supply is in every state in the U.S. So yeah, it's a huge growth potential for us, those relationships, and we have similar size groups in Canada that I obviously can't mention, but just be able to have 50% of our revenues in the U.S. when the dollar soars is a huge benefit to us with costs here in Canadian dollars.
And Tractor Supply, they supply small farms, hobby farms, sort of farming enthusiasts, not tractors per se.
Yeah, if you're familiar with Western market, it's like a PV Mart on steroids sort of thing in the US.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, very much your everyday farmer, or even just go there and get stuff for your backyard, right? Like there's a PV Mart here in Kamloops, and I go and get um, you know anything I need basically at it, because it's just basically a home hardware, but a little bit more focused on agriculture.
All right.
So I'll chat a little bit about revenue growth potential here. So as mentioned, this last year was very foundational for our company. We made the strategic acquisition in February of 2022. That got us the manufacturing business to accelerate our technology commercialization. We made significant operational improvements and increased gross margin by as much as 19%, but in the end up to 26.2%, which I think was 13.6% gain, if I'm not mistaken. And we also had a profitable quarter in the mix there. So we are very pleased with how the first year went of that operations, and we see that continuing to improve as you watch that orange line go up and to the right of this graph. In spring of 2023, we also announced that we had a distribution partnership in place with the Canadian broadacre market, launching carbon PK into that market this year. So we have a full growing season of validation, so that come winter of this year or late fall, we'll be able to have that growing validation of the broadacre market, and then initiate and scale up the commercial deployment into this market. So if we were doing this webinar in a month or two, maybe 2 months, I'd have a lot more data to share on the process of, or the progress of carbon PK. But anecdotally to date, only haven't heard any negatives. It seems positive, and they're going through the analysis of the data and finishing up their growing season. So in spring of 2024, we'll be able to commercially introduce into the broadacre market carbon PK on a much larger scale, as well as we want to introduce a couple other fertilizers that we have in development that'll be both in the broadacre market and the retail sector as well. And that'll be happening as early as 2024. And then we'll be breaking ground on pause glass this year. We're already doing that and working towards being operational in 2024 with that plant in partnership with Lafarge and Recycle BC, which is huge partnerships for us as we look to go to the next level, which is ultimately commercialization. So that pause glass technology, it's going to be validated in this pilot plant so that we can scale commercially with cement partners like Lafarge. There's 2,600 cement plants worldwide, excluding China, that have licensing potential. What's really cool about pause glass, and what makes me so excited about it, is that most of the cement in the world is consumed in major cities, and most of the glass in the world comes out of major cities. So you end up creating this kind of circular solution within a city where you're generating basically the material that you then can use to sequester CO2 and mitigate CO2 of cement emissions on the concrete scale. So our partner Lafarge Holcim alone has 220 cement plants worldwide with roughly 350 million tons of cement capacity. So them being the largest in the world at 220 cement plants, and there's 2,600 cement plants in the world, you can see just how much opportunity there is out there on a licensing potential to scale pause glass.
And just to clarify, they don't have any sort of exclusivities, do they? They're partnering up front. Obviously, they get to learn a bit more than the other folks, but it's not exclusive, is it?
No, so the benefit for Lafarge is that they get to come in at the ground floor and help assist us and shape the way this pause glass plant is built so that hopefully it suits their operations as that bolt-on solution so that they can then be ready and confident to scale that should they choose in their existing operations. There's no exclusivity. What we have agreed to is that they would get a most favored nation term, which effectively means that we can't offer a better deal to their competitor than we would offer them. So obviously they're providing a great deal of benefit to us. There's no better partner than somebody that's made cement powders for over 100 years and does it on the scale that they do, the distribution network that they have, the ability to consume the product that they have, and of course, just the know-how of people that have done it for as long as they've done it. So for us to have them in our corner is just a massive benefit. And so we have to give something back for that benefit. And that's that. And I mean, why would we want it any other way? But that basically the deal that we offer them, if somebody else is going to get a better deal, then that gets matched by them, right? So they'll always have the best deal anywhere in the world where we go.
Makes sense.
That's it. That's it for me.
Oh, all right. I guess circling back to your financials, something that's been in the headlines now for over a year has been inflation, and you're a manufacturer, so you've got possible inflation pressures on your input materials as well, on your pricing power and that. Can you just give us a quick overview on how the world of pricing and inflation is affecting your business?
Yeah, so it affected it pretty huge right at the beginning, which is why we really had to put our heads down and make those operational improvements, implement the price increases where we could, and make those cuts on the ultra low margin business that we just couldn't make it work in our business any longer because of those inflationary pricing increases. So, I mean, we weren't alone in facing that, but we had to really put our heads down and correct it in a hurry because, I mean, you start to see money go out the door pretty fast. So we're pretty proud of where we ended up at the end of the year. I mean, you can see the results of the work that we did and we put in, and a lot of that's a testament to Steve Harper as our CEO, and of course Steve Gurney and the 50 other people that came with the company that we acquired and their experience in handling issues like this. I mean, they've been in business since 1989, so it wasn't the first time that they dealt with inflationary forces, and they were vital to us overcoming those challenges. And it took some hard decisions. I mean, we had to walk away from one of our biggest accounts in order to not just be bleeding money from it. So we made some really hard decisions, and we're really proud of where our year ended up, and hopefully some of those forces come back to earth, for lack of better wording, and we can see some of these changes that we made have incremental benefits going forward, just by those factors sorting themselves out.
All right. And in terms of your business is evolving, so this is going to change, but can you talk about, let's say, in the current state, what is the seasonality of your business? Which quarters are the most robust, or can you just describe the seasonality?
So historically, the second and third quarters are our best quarters, with quarters 1 and 4 being a little bit slower for us.
And sorry, can you just clarify? Are you talking calendar quarters, or since you've got an
fiscal.
April year end,
Yeah,
what quarters are
fiscal,
we referring to?
So sorry, fiscal quarters. So it would be the first quarter of our fiscal year, which is May to end of July, and then the last quarter of the year, which is January to February, or sorry, February to end of April is our last quarter. So historically, those are some of our lower revenue quarters, and of course, we're looking to supplement some of these things. So just as an example, February to April is historically poorer for our business as far as revenues. But as we go to launch some of these fertilizers, that would fit into that market. So there's a nice trade-off where even if we just look at the cat litter business, we look at animals coming inside in the winter. So you see a huge spike up of demand in those animal products during those winter months, where it would be slower for fertilizers. And then as the animals start to go back out and just use nature instead of our products, then we would see a spike in the fertilizer industry, because we also need, crops start to go out, and throughout the summer you're using the fertilizers, and then into fall you're using the fall applications. So we have a nice game plan for that as far as strategy as we implement things, where we can hopefully use our slower periods to ramp up in other areas and just continue to grow year over year.
I've walked through your facility. You did a tour a little over a year ago, and I could see a lot of the optimizations you were putting in there. Obviously, when you add on pause glass, that's a whole new facility and new revenue stream. What kind of capacity utilization are you at right now, and how much would it cost to scale up the business, if there's some sort of rough rule of thumb ways of looking at that?
Yeah, so we can just double basically our output today just by changing our shift schedules, without needing to do any investment. And the biggest investment, if you remember our big industrial dryer right at the start of our tour,
Yeah.
that can basically do up to 450,000 tons, where we're doing about 50,000 tons. So somewhere between 8 and 9 times our output. That would be the biggest, most expensive thing that we would have to kind of change and build our business around changing. So that we can basically 8 to 9 times our output from that. And then it's just, tweaking things throughout our plant, screener sizes, etc., robotics. So it's not, a full rebuild of our plant to hit those numbers. It's strategically upsizing certain areas, to kind of, if we go and we increase our powder, we have to change our milling side, not the entire business, right? So I don't really have a great answer for you, other than the fact that it's very easy to piecemeal our improvements based on where we see an increase in demand. And, we're already starting to see quite an increase in demand in our powder side of our business, which is a little bit of what we brought to the table when we came to this business, is coming as a powder manufacturer of those cement products and those fertilizer products. And we're starting to see those ramp up. So thankfully, our business generated a lot of powders, so we're able to use those byproducts. But we're also seeing the point where, okay, it's getting to the point where we're going to need to scale up a little bit to meet those demands. So we're kind of going through that exercise now of what that looks like, but it's very good problems to have.
Excellent. Going to your fertilizer and the carbon PK, fertilizers have the potential, I think, on two angles of reducing being carbon positive. And a lot of carbon is created producing some synthetic fertilizers as well. Depending on how the soil is treated, it can capture a lot more carbon in there. And if you can maybe elaborate on that a bit. And I'm just wondering, are there potential for carbon credits to add value to that business as well, if you'd be being carbon positive, so to speak?
Yeah, so carbon in carbon PK is strategic. So basically, the fertilizers that we're developing, like you said, are doing two things. Not only are they natural, so they're not going through the industrial processes that generate a lot of emissions, but they're also bringing that carbon back into the soil instead of off-gassing more emissions throughout their life. So there's stats about how much carbon we've actually lost in our soils over time. And our goal is to get that back in the soil and start rebuilding our soil so that we can grow more food for our rising populations. So that's kind of that aspect of things. And that's our proprietary side of our business, right? I mean, that's these products that we have from our mines, as well as, some of the science that we're implementing into these fertilizers to allow us to use 50% less fertilizer per acre and get similar or better results. So yeah, to your point, it's a huge area for us, but we need to quantify it, right? We're very conservative in what we say, because we don't want to be seen as a greenwashing company. Anything that we put out there as far as what we're doing, it needs to be factual. So we're going to go through the necessary steps to quantify the actual environmental benefit that that it is. And then, if there is carbon credits associated with it, we see groups that are able to get those carbon credits. So I think there's certainly potential there. But we want to go through all the necessary steps to make sure that what we put out there and what we say is factual and that that benefit is realized by farmers.
Okay, so it's clearly on the roadmap of
Yeah,
potential
absolutely. And
benefit.
step one was getting it into the fields this year,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so it was huge for us. And let's, get those results back, prove that this fertilizer works the way that we believe it does, and then start scaling and start answering those questions and get that kind of down the pipeline because we can generate a lot of revenues without carbon credits. These are high margin products. So any incremental benefit of carbon credits it's purely bonus.
Yeah. And what a question here from the audience, when can we expect news from the carbon PK trials?
Yeah, I think you'll see over the next 3 months quite a bit of news on the fertilizer side for our business. Um, so I would say stay tuned. It's timing. We're doing this for the financials, but of course, if we did this 2, 3 months from now, it might have been very focused on the fertilizer side of our business or updating on pause glass. So yeah, I would say stay tuned, but very near future, within the kind of 3 months time frame, I believe.
So essentially, the carbon PK was used in this growing season as we're heading into the fall here. We're going to have a harvest, and you're going to start having data points.
Yeah, and a lot of that is anecdotal. I mean,
Yeah.
a farmer says I liked it, it did better, or it's hard to imagine what they're going to say, but a lot of it's going to be anecdotal. There's not a huge study going on in those farmers' fields, but really that's what it comes down to is if a farmer likes it and if it made sense for him and his operations, it made it easier for him or what have you. I mean, if you make the best product in the world and it is 10 times as hard for that farmer to get it into his field, then it doesn't really matter. So that anecdotal evidence for us is huge. And then at the same time, we're doing some greenhouse trials, and we'll get some data from that at the same time that we can kind of put those two things together and hopefully share a lot of news with our shareholders.
Gotcha. Let's switch over to the pause glass side of things. You're expecting to break ground this year and then be running on a trial basis next year, right?
Yeah, so the plan is to be operational in 2024. How
Yeah.
that scale up happens is completely dependent on the success when you turn it on. Thankfully, we have a very experienced team of millwrights, operational people within our business that make products every single day that are going to be, using that expertise in designing and building this plant. And then on top of that, you have the expertise being brought in from Lafarge, so they're very involved in the design standpoint, and they'll be involved, every day until we turn that key on, and then past that. So we've got a lot of smart people helping us to make sure that when we turn that key on, it's hit the ground running and we can start to strategically scale up. So I'm hoping that we're producing in the construction season of next year, but ultimately we're designing a plant, so we'll just take it day by day. But that is our absolute target.
Could you discuss, you mentioned that you're looking for non-dilutive financing on that. Can you discuss the CapEx required and what some of those non-dilutive options are? And yeah.
Yeah, so we'll kind of know as we finish our design exactly what those costs are going to be, but we're anticipating the capex to be less than 5 million on that plant. And then we have operational costs over the course of time as we run that plant. But there's a significant amount of grant funding out there for scaling up pilot plants that have this level of impact, both on the environment and economic benefits over time. Obviously, this is a licensing model for us, but we also see it being very cash flow positive for a cement plant if they were to implement it, if we're right in how our design is, which of course we believe that we are. But we see that having a huge environmental and economic benefit. So there's grant organizations both at a federal and provincial level that we believe we have potential to secure some non-dilutive funding from. And then as well, there's, we bank with the Bank of Montreal, and there's other agencies out there that we believe we can renegotiate some debt with, either, interest only or low interest debt facilities to kind of fund the balance as well. So It's our preference, as I said, to next time we go to market to be at a higher level and not to dilute our shareholders further at these levels.
All right. And we have a question here from the audience on any news on grants applied for. How many? There are a lot of grants and funding agencies out there. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I'll just say that it's been a huge part of my job for the last 6, 8 months. I can't really say much more other than, again, it's a huge part of our focus on trying to bring in that dilutive funding is the grant side of things, and it's going through its process. And we look forward to hopefully being able to talk more about that in the near future.
All right. Question here on your alliance with ZS2. How is that going? Can you give us any perspective on that?
Yeah, so ZS2 is very intertwined in a lot of the stuff we do. We love the products that they make. Obviously, they've got a lot of smart people on their team as well. So we work hand in hand with them on a lot of the projects that we work on. The Pause Glass pilot plant, for example, we're looking to take a stream off that would otherwise be waste when we go through the initial processing of taking off some of the papers, the glues, and those types of things, and some of the waste glass that would come through that process, and have that implemented into the ZS2 panels. So we're constantly looking at where we can feed off one another and reduce waste. And ultimately, we're working towards the same goal, which is lowering the environmental footprint of the building industry and creating products that are going to last longer and be safer for our consumers. So we're very aligned in where we both want to go as companies. And obviously, we have a small ownership stake in ZS2 as well. So, and a lot of their executives are shareholders of Progressive Planet. So we're very aligned, both companies, on where we want to go with our companies and the impact that we want to make. So yeah, I love working with those guys, and any chance that we have to further each other's businesses, we take.
All right. Question here from the audience. News on pyrogenesis? Question mark.
Yeah, so obviously, I don't know how long ago it was now, a year and a half or a year ago, we announced that we are starting an R&D process with pyrogenesis. That is still ongoing. We are hoping that we'll get their process wrapped up by the end of this calendar year, and then we would need about 2 months to go through that and put it through our cement lab and see if those products function the way that we hope that they will. I think there's still huge potential with that technology that they have, and the product that we're looking at creating from that is kind of what goes behind Pause Glass at the point where demand exceeds supply of post-consumer glass, which will be a very good problem to have. But as a company, we're constantly innovating. We're constantly looking for what's next to deliver, incremental value year over year for our shareholders.
All right. And final question here from the audience. Have you sent the Z1 Zeolite for OMRI certification yet?
In process, yeah. So we're looking at implementing that into our operations as well, where we send Zeolite products today.
All right. Ian, we've covered a lot of ground here. Thank you for that. I think we should wrap things up. Are there any final concluding comments that you want to make? And I guess one thing I always like to ask is, you mentioned we'll be getting some fertilizer news over the coming months. I presume more information on the Pause Glass facility, as groundbreaking is expected this year. Can you give us sort of any other types of news flow or types of news investors should be keeping their eyes open for through the end of the year?
Just as a high level, investors aren't always excited to talk about operational improvements and increasing gross margin and those types of efficiencies that we did over the course of the last year. So it wasn't maybe the most exciting news that we had last year, but now we're at a point where we have this business kicking out cash and streamlined. So I'm excited to just start talking about, okay, what does that do for us now? And start talking about growth and get products out to market and be commercializing. So I'm extremely excited about this next year, now that we have this foundation built for our company. And so I see, opportunities to re-rate, at multiple points. The fertilizer side will really kick up over the next 3 months, as I mentioned. I see Pause Glass being, prominent and how we secure those non-dilutive funding being really important for us over the next kind of 6 months. And then of course you start to see next spring, and hopefully our base business has some good news as well. I mean, there's huge growth opportunity just in our base business. A lot of opportunity to grow revenues, a lot of opportunity to increase our cash flow. So I see all three pillars of our business being in the news over the course of the next 12 months. I truly believe that the things that we have going on in this new phase where we've got this foundation set is going to be pivotal, and lots of opportunities to kind of get a re-rate on the market and hopefully deliver a lot more shareholder value.
All right, sounds good. Ian, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today. It's been great seeing you. All the best, and talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Martin. Really appreciate it.